Welcome back to Accountability is Trending. And today we have with us Representative Robert Wharff and Tina Johnson. I'm going to say hello to Tina first. She's my co-host. Hello, Tina. Are you with us?
You're muted.
Are you muted, Tina?
I'm muted, yes.
Oh, no.
Dang, the dogs were barking.
Oh, I hate it when that mute button gets pushed. Hello,
Sorry
Robert.
about
How
that.
are you?
I am well, thank you, Chris.
All righty. Well, being how we have you on here, and thank you for attending today. It's wonderful that you took the time today. I'm going to let you and Tina take over the reins here and talk about, I believe you wanted to talk about WEA today.
Yeah, I think that's one of the topics I wanted to talk about, mainly just because I noticed that there's been a couple flyers sent out to people that is just patently false. But I'm thinking that where Tina's also running for the Senate, she might want to jump in here and talk a little bit about what she's learned. She's dug into WEA a little bit more than I have, so I think we got plenty to talk about.
For sure.
Wonderful.
So yeah, I got those mailers and I was like, I thought Bob Wharf, because tell us about recalibration, because didn't you voted against it because of the constituents not wanting the state insurance plan, isn't that right?
Yeah, I actually took a lot of heat, and that's the one thing that's so offensive to me about the tax on me. I was pretty much responsible for killing the House version of the recalibration, and it was mainly because my constituents had expressed to me their, you know, concern about being forced to change their insurance providers. And I understand that. I'm somebody, as you probably are well aware, I had a young child that had life-threatening illnesses, um, and I had no insurance. And when I finally got insurance, you want to keep the doctors that you have that you go to, and it's always challenging when somebody threatens to take away your current providers. And that was the only thing that I could agree with, was they were saying, well, we've been told that the state insurance is good and it's all this, but there was still a lot of questions about whether their doctors would be still accepted, or if they'd have to possibly be changing doctors because of the providers. And I just didn't like that. So I was a no vote on that. And I mean, I kind of got chided for killing the bill. They said, "What the heck you doing? We need to pass this." And I said, my constituents said they didn't want to lose their insurance. They didn't want to have to switch. And they basically beat me up a little bit on that, but I held my ground, as I usually do on my votes. Anytime I cast a vote, there's a reason behind that. And bless you. But yeah, that's the one thing that's frustrating to me. But it's the one thing I've always said when I've met with the WEA in the past. I told them, I used to lobby. I lobbied for my sportsman's group, and I just said I understand that there's always a bias that's represented in that. And I said I got enough teachers I talk to that I don't really put a lot of stock in what the lobby says to me, because I can talk directly with the teachers. And so that to me is more important than what the lobbyist is telling me, because I know that a lot of our teachers in our community, they're not members of WEA. They're not actively participating in that, and they don't share their views. So it's one of those things that you'll learn over time, Tina, that there's a lot of people out there that are wanting your time, and there's some people that it's worth spending some time, and there's some people that it's really all they're doing is taking you away from the things you need to do.
Right. And the goals.
Yeah. but it is, and I don't want me to be the only one talking. Go ahead, Tina, and jump in here a little bit.
No,
Tell
I
us
loved
what you
hearing
learned.
that.
Yeah.
One of the other things that when it comes to, because we handed out constitutions together at the
Yep.
schools, we had a great response, I
That was,
thought, at every single school. So it's hard to believe that they make it sound like you hate. And I think that's one of the biggest things. With Moms for Liberty, we're on the SPLC hate list. And they say, well, it's not that big of a deal. No, it's a hate map. And I believe that the schools use that information. I know that the Wyoming School Board Association has used that information, and there's an aggressive attack towards people fighting for, against the Wyoming Education Association and the National Education Association.
um,
I didn't realize it was fighting. I had no idea what it was going to entail. I didn't understand the level of hate, the level of anger until I started the Moms for Liberty.
and what amazes me is the dishonesty. I mean,
Yes.
we talk about the plaque, these mailers. I'm gonna hold up the one. Some of the people got this in the mail, and I mean, it's just flat out
Yeah.
fallacious. It says Wyoming it says who is Representative Bob Wharff fighting for? Wyoming students or political agendas? I fight for my constituents. The Wyoming students don't vote, so I hate to say it, but I'm not here to punish kids. My kids both graduated from Evanston High School. I'm a product of a public school, but one of the things that was always I was surprised that people didn't cause people to think a little harder when we created the education savings account. It gave everybody the opportunity to have $7,000 per child that could be used in private instruction. And it's always amazed me that nobody went, "Oh, wait a minute, we average $22,000 a year per child to educate them in our public system. Why is it that a private education could be provided for $7,000?" And the thing that a lot of people didn't realize is if I pulled my child out of an Evanston school, yeah, I got the $7,000 for my kid it's not, I don't get the money. It's a credit that I can go spend and that they'll reimburse that money up to $7,000 of private schooling. And I look at that and say, the other 15, most people didn't realize this. The other 15 went to the school district. So they have my kid off the books, but they still got the 7 grand or the $15,000 for my son or my daughter, who's not going to be there. And it did I guess the amount got smaller because they do that on a 3-year average. And they oh, do you got a question?
So, yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
When I was collecting signatures at the courthouse for the 50% off taxes that we're going to be voting on,
Yep.
the amount of that was appropriated at that time was around $17,000 per student. Are you telling me it's now over $20,000 per student?
It is. The state average, I think, is 22,000. I can't remember, might be our average is 22. But I know that the most recent figure I saw was 20 to $22,000 per student.
Wow. And
And
they still screaming for more money.
they are.
Wow.
And on the revenue committee, we kind of been criticized a little bit because we've been trying to cut personal property tax. Our goal is actually to eliminate it. And that's one reason I'd like to go back. We still got work to do, but I know the revenue committee is looking hard at that. But most people don't understand that 70% of your property taxes are consumed by your local school districts. And it's not, like I said, I think education is probably one of the most important things we do. But I still look at that and I think, how in the world did people not go, "Oh, wait a minute. I've always been under the impression that a private school, is a lot more than a public school, public education. And I mean, I just don't get it. I had an opportunity to go back to Indiana, and we looked at school choice. And I can tell you, I like that because it was more like college. You could look at the classes, they had kind of their foundational requirements that they had that all the kids were taking, but they had like core subjects. And if they were interested in welding, they could learn to weld. If they were interested in becoming a doctor, they could look at more medical related stuff. And I looked at that and I thought, you know, that's why I liked college when I went to college, is I got to finally take the classes I was interested in rather than just showing up and having to jump through the hoops. But they have the same thing when you go to college. I mean, I didn't know that. I was the first in my family to get a higher education, and it was interesting to me that they actually admitted that they had classes that they had that the sole purpose of those classes was to weed people out. And I just think that's so terrible. I mean, but that is they have classes that, and I know, a lot of people go, well, algebra, trigonometry, that stuff I'll never use, but I can tell you as a child, sometimes you don't understand that, but all you got to do is look at what our military's done, the things that they do. I guarantee you, those people didn't sleep through their math classes. They didn't sleep through their higher education classes because you got to be able to think quick. You look at how quick some of those decisions are being made, and yeah, they have a computer that's helping them, but I'm here to tell you, they got to know what in because everybody knows garbage in, garbage out.
Oh,
And
yep.
so if you don't put the right stuff in the military, it could have pretty dire consequences. So,
Yep.
you got to
Well,
know what you're doing.
personally, I have a grandson that's looking at going into Space Force. And
Yeah.
boy, it, those are some challenges right there, just getting into Space Force. And uh, he was telling me some of the challenges that it takes just to apply for it and the requirements and that. I was in the Air Force, and uh, that was that's nowhere near what it takes to qualify in the requirements for Space Force. And I'm all for a vocational curriculum just because it would interest the children for something they might be interested in. And if they didn't say they weren't interested in mechanics, maybe they would be interested in something more musical or something more artistic. That to me sounds uh, something that would engage the student more to keep them in school and versus them dropping out. Tina, what's your views on something like that?
So some of my husband had to take in college classes about I can't remember, some sort of marriage, some sort of artsy class that had nothing to do with actual education because you have to be a well-rounded student. When it comes to the homeschooling, I'm all about homeschooling. They can get it done in 2 to 3 hours a day, and then the child's learning real world education. And one of the things, because as a boss, I've worked with teenagers at KFC and TA. I trained these people for over 20 years. And my thought process is you always remember your favorite teacher and you always remember your first job. And sometimes I think people lose focus on the fact that these students are going to be people out in the community. And it takes an entire community to run. And we're getting away from foundations that, and I don't mean it on a workforce basis, because yes, the restaurants need 14 and 15-year-olds to help to keep the community going. They really do. But when did we start working? 14 or 15 years old. When did we get our work ethic? 14 and 15 years old. We've gone away from, and now most training is done online Most training is, we've gotten away from the human connection, but I think that a lot of the kids did not know how to read or write. I was struggling. They had no idea how to count back money. That was a struggle. Now that we know that we're headed towards digital currency, that makes sense. But, back when I was handling cash, they didn't know how to fill out their own paperwork. They didn't know how to. And when I was running for school board, one of the things that I found was the University of Wyoming, 24 students from Evanston had applied to Western Wyoming, and over half had to take remedial classes just to start. It is my opinion that if I'm paying $22,000 per year for their entire school career, that by the time they turn 18, not only do they graduate and make the numbers look good, but they know the foundations. They know how to read and write. And the other thing, colleges are having to teach these kids how to read. They don't even know how to read college words because we took phonics out of reading. We started teaching them memory of words and that kind of thing. We have to go back to education, true education and foundation. That's
Well,
my thought on that.
that's the thing that's interesting. I've seen a couple videos, YouTube videos, where they talk about that, and they talk about the fact that the children today that are going through school, they're not learning critical thinking skills. They're with all the technology we've got so much technology there that it's just overwhelming, and it can be good or bad, but they're starting to see that with all the computer stuff they're doing, kids aren't learning how to think critically. They've learned how to search things. They've learned how to do all these things that are technologically related, but it's they're not developing that ability to discern something that they read. Uh, because they can't even do that, as you said. And I can't remember the number, but I know the University of Wyoming, they said the same thing, Tina, that, almost all the kids that show up, they're having to spend 2 years to get the kids up to where they can perform. And
Exactly.
that's 2 years of college that, because you don't, that doesn't put you ahead any. That's you're 2 years behind the people that showed up prepared and ready to go. And I do think a lot of it, I've had a lot of the teachers tell me that when they pass the No Child Left Behind, sounds real good on the surface, but when they passed that, what it did is it didn't bring everybody from the bottom up. It brought the top down, and all it did is it made for probably a lesser quality of education. And I do think that's one of the problems. We walked away from the simple things, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, the three R's. I remember that. That's what we always talked about. Reading, writing, and arithmetic.
But and the other thing that I experienced was, and this is how I feel like that is going out into the community, is at KFC. So Johnny comes to me and he can't read cursive. So now I can't write in cursive. So now I have to start printing. So that's how we're dumbing down the entire society, is because they learned Common Core math. Common Core math makes no sense to actual adults. I mean, now the adults know Common Core, but we had to kind of, and it's not real. I'm not going to say it's not real math. I don't understand it, but they're not quick on. They can't add 2 plus 2 super fast. They have to go through a process.
Yeah.
So I feel like they took it out into the community, and that's how we've dumbed down society, was taking it from the schools and then bringing it out. And I had a guy, we refinanced our house, and this guy, and he thought it was really funny. And he's joking, and he said, what do you call a kid that can't write cursive? And I said, what? And he said, a renter. And I thought, that's not funny. He said, yeah, because they can't sign anything. They'll never be able to own anything. And I thought, well, that's interesting,
Wow.
because what is
Well,
what some of us know the goal is you will own nothing and be happy. So what have we done? We've made renters.
Yep. Well, and one of the things that I've always had pointed out to me when they quit teaching kids how to read and write cursive, what's the Constitution written under? I mean, we got it
Exactly.
printed, thank goodness, but the original Constitution, if you were to go back and read that,
Yeah.
you can't read cursive, you're not going to be able to read it because not only did they speak a little bit different than we did, they wrote a little different too. But that is, I think that's what this is all about, is to just make us dependent on government. And, yeah, you can get stuff printed, and that's the one thing that's so harmful about not learning how to critically think. And I've found that to happen to me. I've read stuff or I've seen stuff that I thought was good, honest information, and then you find out that it's not, and that's the one thing that I think has been the most confusing is just the amount of, I don't know how else to say it, they're lies. To me, they tell partial truths. They want to paint this as a bad picture, and the reality is, yeah, I look at WEA, they're mad that we voted to pass the recalibration, but the reality is we have not passed a recalibration. The last one they passed was in 2010. We're 16 years beyond that. And, we were initially told every 5 years we had to do this. But, it is frustrating because, I remember the first time I got elected, um, they accused me of trying to take away the athletics and the after school programs and stuff. And it really came down to this. When I went and met with Ryan Thomas, who was the superintendent, met with him and a few other his counterparts that was with him, and they wanted me to support a tax. There's a bill that had a 6% reduction and a 1% tax that they were awarded. And I told them, I said, the bill can only do one thing. And I said, I think the first thing that's going to happen is they'll split that off and you'll have a 1% tax that they'll kill and you'll be stuck with the 6% reduction. I said, I didn't think that was a good idea when they told me that's what they wanted. And I had an opportunity because I had another colleague that was from northeastern Wyoming up in Gillette, and he had written a bill that it had a 3% cut, and the model that he put, it did. It eliminated a lot of the athletics. It had impacts on some of the coaching and stuff. So it was that their information is partially true, but the reality is, I talked to them later and they were mad and they said, well, I said, I figured a 3% cut's better than a 6% cut, but I said, it's been a while since I've done math. Am I wrong? And they just kind of looked at me and blinked their eyes, but they continue to say that the legislature's not given enough money. And I knew just enough to be dangerous. I knew that we hired an outside consulting firm that basically went around and they compared what the states pay for superintendents all the way down to the lowest person on the payroll. Uh, but they did the whole thing. And what I learned was the legislature can basically come up with a final block grants, what they all call it, but it comes from the school foundation account, and that account, it's based on the attendance of the kids. They have all these things that they use to come up with the formula, but for example, if they had the superintendent being paid $150,000 in the model that we saw, that was the basis for the block grant that was given. If the local school board decided to give $200,000 to their superintendent, that $50,000 came from all the people, all the things underneath. And what we found is they would always say, well, we didn't get enough money. Well, had they followed the recommendation of this consulting firm that we've spent millions of dollars on this consulting firm. It's the same firm that's been doing it. And I think it's just a way to launder money. I mean, we're giving money to the left like you wouldn't believe, and we see that. We see that in all over when you look at what they're finding on a national level. And I do. I think Wyoming is a microcosm of the national government. But I think we got all kinds of things like that where we're funneling money to the wrong things and the wrong organizations and promoting those things that actually go against our values. But that's what I saw in all that. And I told the press when the press attacked me the first time, I answered their questions. And the reality is the legislature can affect the block grant. That block grant's then handed down to the local school board, which we all agree the government closest to the people is the best. But this is one reason why I tell everybody the two most important votes you're going to cast is who's your sheriff and who's on that school board. Those are the two things that really have the biggest impacts because you have the sheriff, their role changes. If you're ever caught with the federal government and you're battling, their role changes from being that as law enforcement to protecting you and ensuring that your individual rights are not violated by the federal government. That's what a real sheriff should be doing.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important that we hire sheriffs that understand their role. It's not just about being a cop. They,
Right.
they have a lot of different responsibilities that they have to do,
Yep.
and the other one's the school board. And the reason why the school board is so important, we give lots of money to the school districts, and those school districts have 12 years where they've got your kid. And, they want to even get into what do they call it? Preschool. They want to get into that and start even younger with the education of these kids. And I look at that and I think, we really, we spend all kinds of money on our athletics, the things that aren't important. And I say that I'm talking about the professional basketball players and the professional football players. And I look at the amount of money those people make for our entertainment, but then you look at the things that are essential, and I don't think we pay enough attention to the things that matter. And so that's one of my big things. I'll get off my soapbox, but I do think the school board is very, and I anytime you're in a public service role, you're always appreciated by those that you represent, but you're always going to have somebody that doesn't like the decisions that you've made. And so, you're going to be attacked. And that's one thing I've got pretty thick skin anymore. I mean, I've been called just about everything but Robert.
Well, I believe I'm going to let Tina do some final comments here and
Yeah.
questions for you, Mr. Wharf.
Okay.
So pretty much, thank you so much for coming on and visiting with us today. It was a great conversation. As a Moms for Liberty chapter chair, the Wyoming Education Association is always interesting to me. I think that education is my number one platform, and they will say that it's not, and I'm sure that they will love me just as much as they love you. So I look forward to having my face splattered all over everybody's mail as well.
All right.
Yeah, I really need to thank you guys too. I mean, this is a great opportunity. I appreciate you giving me the chance to come talk about it because it's so easy to send out disinformation, and if people don't know, they don't know. So we got to correct it, and that is one thing. The Freedom Caucus put together a really good YouTube video where they talk about the recalibration and the process, and that's something that if you can get a link to that, that would be very good to provide the people because it totally walks it right through and explains it better than
Yeah.
I have today.
We should be
Yeah.
able to get a splash link on that for you there, Mr. Wharf, and that shouldn't be a problem. And I'd like to thank both you guys for your time. This is wonderful that you can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is accountability is trending, and I thank you all for watching. And remember to like and share and uh, subscribe. Geez, I must be getting old, Bob. Well,
I
thank
hear
you all. And remember, accountability is trending. I'm your host, Cris Hopkin, and thank you.